They should be fine. Okay. All right. You're good. You can do the arrow.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, we should start. Thank you all for coming to the last lecture. I'm filling in for Stephanie because she has a head cold. And David is en route, I think, to China to be at WKU, so he is not here. But anyway, I want to introduce our last lecture of the series, our own faculty member, Laura Del Pino. So, Laura Del Pino, yeah, please. You need no introduction, but I have one anyway. Laura Pino received a Bachelor of Architecture and a Master in Architecture from the University of Valladolid.
Yeah,
Spain, Spain. After working for firms in Spain and in the Netherlands, where she acquired experience in infrastructure, building construction, and public development. She was awarded the Caja España Scholarship and completed a Master of Science in Advanced Architectural Design at Columbia University's Graduate School of Architecture Planning and Preservation. She was a finalist at the 2011 Ken Roberts Memorial Delineation Competition, and her work was published in Ivalo Skyscrapers in 2012. She is currently a New York City resident and has been a Senior Design Associate at CASA since 2010. She has served as the lead project architect on numerous CASA projects, including the 100 Walls Church, Emilio Pavilion, Hugh Hotel, the Frame House, La Salle Church, Costa Rica Congress Hall, Catasian Airport, Sintala Pavilions, the Gallery of Nima, the La 100 Master Plan, and Sorbita Arts Complex, and Bogota Central Master Plan, all that since 2010, as well as numerous interior design projects in the firm. Many of her drawings for those and other proposals are featured in CASA 2011-2016, the inaugural monograph that celebrates the first 5 years of the firm. Most recently, she helped coordinate the design of the CASA installation Facing Geometry at the 2016 Venice Biennale. And for those of you struggling with structures, a little known fact, she loves mathematics and geometry. Okay, without any further ado, I want to give you Laura.
Thank you.
Don't worry, don't worry.
Thank you. So today I'm going to talk a bit about the work that we have done in our office at CASA, specifically about the projects that we have done in the Philippines. And I wanted to start with this quote, neither on dry land nor in the sea. It is taken from a folk tale that is typical in the Philippines, but also in other areas of South Asia. It's the tale of the Battle of the Crabs. The story goes that the crabs lived very close to the beach, but they were bothered by the constant noise of the waves. So one day they decided that they wanted to fight the waves so that they will not make so much noise. And they went to war, but unfortunately the waves just overwhelmed them and all of them drowned. And since then they were forced as a punishment to live in this constant limbo, neither on dry land nor in the sea. And as you can see in this map, the Philippines faces a lot of climate challenges. It's a constellation of more than 7,000 islands with many different crafts, folklore, dialects, traditions that are part of this very dispersed geography. Even Tagalog is not really the dialect that everyone uses. Many times when we have talked with clients, they prefer to use English because their dialects differ so much. So with our projects, we have become very familiar with this challenges, this neither dry land nor sea, this constant risk of climate change, but also this very rich culture. And we learn all of this through our principal, Carlos Alman. He's half Filipino, and he has introduced into all of us this love for the Philippines, and also this curiosity towards these islands. And this is all of us in the Botanical Garden in New York. So we have been able to do different projects in many areas of the Philippines, mostly in Luzon, the main island where the capital is, Manila. But we have also worked in other regions like Visayas, Camarines Sur, and you will see when I show the project. So a bit all over, and we have become very familiar with the culture. Today, what I'm going to show is a series of projects where we were faced with the challenge of designing buildings that initially had a function, but ended up having many lives, many functions, because they had to become resilient for climate change, but also work as public spaces, and very open and democratic. And the very first one that I want to start with is what I have called the Marshland, and it's our very, very first project, the 100 Walls Church. It's in an island that is called Cebu, in the central Visayas area. The word Cebu means in the dialect trade or trading. It has always been a very important trading hub for the region, and also with both towards the west. And we were asked by the clients to design a church in a relatively weird condition. This church was going to be in a mall. And that might be very strange, but we got to know that religion is a very integral part of culture in the Philippines. So finding chapels or churches in malls is not that uncommon. Our situation was that it was the first time that we were faced with that challenge. So we started looking at the island, and we discovered that it had beautiful manglars, obviously the trading, but also amazing beaches, very protected actually, and also the famous cross that the Portuguese conqueror Magallanes have left. So with all these factors, we went a bit deeper and started to look at the site itself. Our site was in a marshland, in a piece of reclaimed land that was relatively close to the Cebu Historic Center, but also to the Mactan International Airport and other cities of the area. So our site itself was quite empty, but it was not going to be like that for a very long time. And the clients give us this. This was going to be the complex. If you go to Google Maps now, it's quite built. There are a lot of retail and commercial buildings. But at that point, when we did the project in 2010, it was literally empty. We only had the roads. And that green spot is where our church was going to be. They told us a bit about how they wanted the flow of cars and pedestrians. We started to study a bit more the views toward the Cebu Strait, the views towards the historic area, and also towards the ocean. But we didn't have that much to go, because this was how it looked like. It was very new reclaimed land. And we thought, well, if this church is going to be a chapel or a church inside a mall, it has to be different. We have to use a different kind of measure. And that's when we decided to take the pew as our unit. And with that pew, we created, or it determined, the grid of the site. And that grid in turn helped us organize the program. And later on, we decided, well, if we are using that grid and that pew as our unit of measure, why not making it as our unit of measure for the structure itself? Why not making, instead of the more hierarchical traditional Catholic Church, to create a church that is much more democratic, where people can go and wander and get lost? And that's how the walls started to appear. It also had, to be fair, a kind of budget constraint reason. We had, I think, $900,000 to design this building that was going to be for more than 1,000 people. It was also going to be, the timeline was extremely limited. We only had, I think, 7 months from the beginning of the project till it was built, because a Vatican delegation was going to come on a very specific date to consecrate the church, because this church was actually, it's not called the 100 Walls Church, it's called the San Pedro Calungsod. He's the saint of Cebu. So it had to be that day, it had to open that day, and we couldn't wait. So doing the walls in concrete solved 2 problems. They were structural, but they would also become a kind of enclosure. And they would help us also build what we kept referring as the forest of walls. There would be corners, spaces where people could just get lost and pray without having to go to the congregation hall. Before getting to this scheme, we studied very deeply the Gothic church, the neoclassical church, and see how those flows work. But surprisingly, and we actually didn't tell this to the clients, we also got inspiration from mosques, because in the mosque, it's a more democratic space where there's not such a division of hierarchy. And we wanted to bring that into this project so that people could wander through and use the public space however they wanted. So we, together with that forest of walls and this idea of openness outside the congregation hall, we also wanted to bring the concept of the sunken gardens. The sunken gardens, or the idea of the garden, the orchard, has a deep meaning in the Bible. It's always, there are very specific moments in the Bible where the garden plays a very important role. One of the most inspirational for us was actually when Jesus goes to the olive orchard and he has doubts if his destiny is actually dying. So we wanted to bring that self-reflection and that connection to spirituality in our building, so people can move all around these walls, no matter what time of the day, even if there's not a mass in the congregation hall. So those gardens ended up being paired with passages of the Bible. This drawing, it looks very complex, but all the gardens are connected to that quote of the Bible. They follow a specific path or a specific flow, and they have also a very specific relationship with the hierarchy of walls. The walls sometimes go higher in those gardens so that people feel a bit more protected and they can have more of an intimate prayer. So the building got built and we it was crazy. They did it. They ended up doing 24-hour shifts. And if you go to Google Street View right now, a lot of it is built. But at that point, when they consecrated this church, I think that 1 million people went to the celebration, and they extended in all these adjacent lots to listen to the Vatican group of people that came to, a group of priests that came to consecrate this church. So, as you can see from this side, the church can feel very opaque and private, but as you get closer, we start to see those nooks, those corners that are a bit more inviting, a bit like a forest. And you can start to see how the people gather in those gardens to really experience spirituality. We have been very proud about the fact that it seems, from what we have been told, that the church has more used on the outside, on this forest of walls, than on the congregation space itself, which I think makes the project successful, because this area is open all the time. I wanted to bring this image for several reasons, because it shows those nooks and corners that I was talking about, where you can have a prayer in a more intimate way, but also because of the railing. We never chose this railing. It's really ugly, but we were running out of time, and our client, the developer, just put the railing of the mall here, and we had to accept it and go on, because otherwise the church would not have opened. And you know, it's what happens sometimes with architecture. You have to move forward, because what are you going to do? Say, no, I don't, let's cancel, we will not go ahead. that doesn't work, that doesn't benefit anyone. So we accepted, among other things, and even though it was not ideal, I don't think that the visitors care that much, and I don't know, they enjoy it. So we would change it, but we are happy in the end. There's the main door that gives you access to the congregation hall, but there are also multiple doors that allow the visitors to access the congregation hall in a very democratic and open way. So these doors are always a bit hidden to create that feeling of a very special threshold. And we have seen these images of families praying outside very often. Sometimes they feel more comfortable doing it outside or more private, and it works really well for them because they can go in the lunch break if they are working in the mall, things like that. And we have been lucky enough that the children band of the area goes to practice here. They practice on the outside because they really like how they have a bit more intimacy in these pockets, in this forest of walls. This actually is a group of people having a prayer outside while a mass is happening on the inside. And that's the main door, what you would say the traditional access to the church that we include, because obviously there are very large events when 1,000 people or more come here. Masses are very, very popular in the Philippines. So on Sundays, 1,000 people really come to this church. And these are some of them living. And we have also been very happy about the fact that some years after the building was built, there was not a typhoon, but a very, very intense storm. And people gathered in the church and used it as a shelter. So that is what I was talking about before, one of those multiple lives that we didn't expect our building to have and happen. I also wanted to bring this image to show that, yes, we never chose that type of drop ceiling. We have to move with it because there was no time to prepare the concrete system of roofs to be as clean as they should be, to be exposed. This is also the celebration of the Mass, and you can see all those multiple doors that I was mentioning before. And normally they also leave all of them open because it works really well for cross ventilation. We try to have as little use of air conditioning as possible because it's not a rich congregation, so they cannot afford to have the air conditioning running all the time. Again, another factor that influenced the design. The practices of the band continue at night. This is actually during Christmas, and this space is used all the time, even at nighttime. I think that is great because when people leave the mall, if they feel the need of meditation or of some moment of respite, they can come here and just relax and wander through and get lost in that forest, and they really feel more connected. And surprisingly, we did this church, and the La Salle Order really liked it and contacted us to do another church, which we didn't expect. This is a different one. I have called it the lake, is the Santuario de la Salle, because it's really close to the Taal Lake. The Taal Lake is a very massive crater close to Manila that became a lake as thousands of years passed by. And we were asked by them to do this church. We didn't have much information when they contacted us because this church was going to be also in a relatively peculiar location. It was going to be in a campus, but the campus had not been built at all. It was going to be their new technological campus, and the first building that they were going to do basically was going to be the church. So we didn't have even a map at that point, and we said, well, we don't have much to go with, so let's start and look at the star. The star is the symbol of La Salle, and maybe that would help us understand a bit more how can we organize the program. So we started thinking, well, if this is going to be a church for students, it cannot be a place that is super enclosed. It has to be open, it has to be welcoming, because it's going to be used for much more than masses. It's going to be for student groups. Also, sometimes from what we have heard, they meet and they as unions there. So it's like, it's a place that, again, it has multiple lives, many more than we expected. And thinking about this, we felt, well, let's design a space that is kind of amorphous, that doesn't have a very clear axis or orientation, because the client also didn't know if they were going to orient the building like that or rotate it. They didn't know yet because they didn't know how the whole master plan of the campus was going to work. So, inspired by the ambulatory space that you can find in the Gothic church, which is that corridor that goes behind the altar and all around the axis of the church, we took that and we wrapped the congregation hall and introduced program, other kind of rooms, the baptistry, the adoration chapel. This is again a very large church. It is for 1,200 people, just the congregation space. So we had to be careful about that. And also, again, we had very limited budget. We only have $700,000, and we have to be careful in the way that we spend it. So we thought that designing a system of concrete fins that would wrap the building would make the building open enough to attract the students while keeping it in budget. So we will not make a super enclosed building and also not super open, not with glass. We modulated the rhythm of those fins. We opened them every time that we wanted to create an entrance and close them every time we have a more private room, like the sacristy or the adoration chapel, things like that. And this time we actually included a bell tower. I don't know if you noticed, but in the previous church we didn't have a bell tower because the clients realized that that church, the 100 Walls Church, worked as a very democratic, open space, and they didn't want to have the hierarchy of the tower. Here we did, for the completely different reason. They wanted the bell tower to be visible from all the points of the campus, so the students would be able to always identify where they are and go there if they have to. And yeah, this is the floor plan. We work a lot with the radius and the rhythm of the fins to make them big enough for the cranes and the wheelchairs and the thousands of students that will come, but also close enough in certain areas to provide privacy. And this building just got built this year. And we started in 2014, and it got built 10 years after because it took them a very, very long time to raise the $700,000. It was very difficult for them. And also because they decided that the clients were very excited about the project, and they decided that this church was going to be a pilgrimage church, which means that right now there's an arm and a relic, an arm of Saint LaSalle in the church. So all that brought a series of constraints into the building. It had to be consecrated before the relic came, so we have to finish construction very fast. But that's how it looked like. The campus, as you can see, is still empty. There are no buildings yet, although they are thinking of preserving all these trees surrounding the church because they want to make this space very natural and intimate. So this is a view from, I think, the only building that is built, the science building. And again, you can see that the finishes are very humble. With $700,000, even though we are building in the Philippines, we cannot use very complex technology for the structure or the finishes. We have to use concrete. And we can modify the geometry to accentuate certain aspects, but in the end, it's going to be a very simple structure. So this is one of the entrances, and that modulation of the rhythm of the fins is more evident here because you can see how it's more open towards the congregation hall and more close towards the sides where we have the sacristy and the adoration chapel. A view from the corner. I mean, I have to say that we also got a lot of inspiration from the surrounding trees because at the beginning it was the only thing that we knew about the site. The clients, I don't think that the clients ended up giving us a site plan until we started construction, a topography map. And a view of the tower from farther away, from a very big access point towards the campus. So some details of how the structure would work. We were using also concrete ring beams to keep the structure very thin, but also still resilient, because this project can also has to be resilient to typhoons, flooding, and yeah, not earthquakes in this case, but intense typhoons. And the view from the inside. So when a lot of students, what they do right now is they come inside this space and they just hang out, because it feels a bit more private, but you still have the connection to nature and the forest that surrounds you. So it's a bit more special and it's more relaxed than other areas of the campus. You can walk all around that surrounding space of the congregation hall, but there are areas that are a bit more tight, and those spaces are like that because they are more private and we want to control the flow of people. And that's the access to the bell tower. We designed a spiral staircase that can also be accessed by the public. They never got the steps of the spiral tower with the same color as the rest of the concrete, but again, these are things that we live with. And the clients have started bringing benches into this area and really using the space in the way that was supposed to work. This was going to be a baptistry, but when it became a pilgrimage church, this is where the relic is. So that's why we had to use very specific finishes of wood and marble, because this was a more sacred space than the rest of the space, of the building. However, the rest of the pavement is very simple, just concrete with aggregates, and the entrances are towards the church. Again, there's not a single entrance, there's a big one, but there are also many others, 13, replicating the 13 stations of the cross, are in wood, very simple. And this is the entrance. Our intention initially was not using benches. We wanted a space with individual chairs where all the students could move around and not follow this strict organization. But unfortunately, when it became a pilgrimage church, there were a lot of constraints, and this was one of them. We had to use benches instead. The most delicate materials were also reserved for this space. For the congregation hall, we have wood and marble, so it feels more special, more sacred, and I don't know, a differentiation with the different from the outside. In the end, more unique. I imagine that you have noticed the floor and this crazy pattern that we have. This is inspired by the ceramic patterns that the local community does. And it's always this mix of two colors, black and white or red and white. In this case, we did our own interpretation, we designed our own tile, and we made it in dark green and white. The dark green is because it's the color of La Salle. And for the sacristy, we use a slightly different color. We use the pink orange color. This is also a very special private room where the priest is and meets with the students, or now couples that want to get married and things like that. So we also used finishes that were a bit more delicate. But again, we tried to focus when we were using the budget. Well, where do we want to spend the money? What do we want to make a bit more special? And we thought that these interiors deserve to have a more intense treatment. So we have done a lot of churches in a way, but we have done also other kind of projects that had to face the many lives that I was talking about before, the challenges of climate change. This one, I call it the forest, and it's the Memphis Mission Surgery Center. It's in an area of the Philippines called Negros. It's very close to Cebu, the very first project that I showed, in central Visayas. And it's an area that, as you can see in the graphics here, there has not been much change in life expectancy, but there has been an extreme growth in the last decades. Unfortunately, they don't have good healthcare. There are very, very few hospitals, and they also have very, very few schools. So the clients contacted us, two doctors from Houston, although they are originally from the Philippines, and they told us, we want to build the first trauma center in Negros, and we want to do a project that would be the beginning of a hospital complex. And they gave us a lot of freedom to design the project in the sense that we have to follow the constraints of the trauma center, but we could include other aspects that would complete the project and that were not necessarily connected to healthcare. In order to do that, we have to study the region in depth. We have to look at the energy, the education level, the proximity to transportation hubs, to cities. And we discovered that this is an area that has been traditionally very, very agricultural. It still is. They depend a lot on sugarcane and coconut farms. They have beautiful forests, and among those forests, they have the coconut tree forest, but they also have other things. They have a lot of industry to manufacture, to transform the sugarcane. They have vernacular architecture, and they have a famous painting that is called the Angry Christ, and it's like this angry Jesus in one of their churches. So we thought, well, let's bring the beautiful landscapes that the island have and the industrial past and present, and make a project that combines both worlds. And that's how we got to the program. Besides being a hospital, we really wanted to give back to the community some kind of education hub, because there's nothing in this area. It's extremely, extremely agricultural. And we thought that also bringing art would make a lot of sense. So we created this kind of crazy shape with a large public plaza at the entrance, consultation offices, which are those bubbles around it, and then residences for doctors on one side, and then the trauma center itself. And we surrounded all these with multiple ecosystems or landscapes that we could find in the island. So the transition would be not as harsh. We normally don't do these kind of renderings. We had to do them because the clients are using them right now to raise money for this project, which is the status of the project right now. So you see that public plaza, that's where we will have a chapel that can never, we have always to consider that in the Philippines. Also, the consultation center, that roof with those shapes is the doctor's houses, and then we have all the more traditional surgical center towards the back. So the idea is that this hospital would also attract doctors, foreign doctors, that would come here to provide expertise that is unknown in the area. So they will spend 1 year, 2 years living here and doing, showing the community, showing our doctors how they do their work, and that way the community would grow. This would be really the first phase of a bigger healthcare educational complex. And these were all the elements that we have into account. We have the chapel. The chapel would not only be for the visitors, but it would also be for the community. And it's much smaller than the churches that I showed you before, and it's mostly a space where people can briefly go and just meditate or be there if they feel very, I don't know, very oppressed. We had the consultation area, which are all those bubbles around the main zone. We imagine a big staircase that would open to the public, but also it would act as a way of making the entrance to the hospital a bit less traumatic. We have the medical area. We brought some of those coconut farm trees here too, so they would be, it would make the process a bit less traumatic. We had the rooms. There would be 14 patient rooms that would face the sand dunes and the water, which is also a kind of landscape that you can find in Negros. And we try to use light colors for the corridors and more vibrant palettes for the rooms. We have the residencies for the doctors, and again, those would face the grasslands of Negros, and they would be more open towards the outside. So those were, like, as I would say, a bit more of the traditional program elements, but we included something that we thought that the community needed and the clients didn't consider initially, which was a library, so that children and the families could come here, a cafe for celebrations or for the relatives of the patients, and an artist studio. The idea is that international and local artists can come here, spend some time, do art with the patients, and also connect with the craftsmen of the island. So a relatively peculiar building with many lives, many elements happening into it. And we go from the forests on land to the forest and the water. We did also a boutique hotel in the coral reefs of Boracay. Boracay is a kind of a very different location from Negros. This is a very, very touristic island. It's where all the surfers go, and it has a lot of foreign tourism. However, when the clients contacted us, they told us that our site was going to be in the middle of the city. We were not going to have any views of the beach. And we thought, well, how can we do a project that it's in a beach destination when we don't see the beach? And we thought that the best way to do this was to create a series of rings around a central courtyard that will not only be for the visitors, this courtyard would be for everyone in the city. This is public, it's open. Everyone that lives in Boracay can enter, whether they stay or not in the building. And that is what made it very successful. It became a quite lively space, even though you cannot really see the beach from those rooms. We tried to bring the city into the project, even though our project was not in the traditional resort areas. I wanted to bring this project too, because again, it was a project where we found ourselves not as limited with the budget, but we were limited with the materials. We couldn't do a steel structure here because there cannot be very heavy boats coming to the island. They would destroy the coral reefs. So we had to do the whole structure in concrete, something that we initially didn't consider, and use materials that were in the island or that could be transported in a smaller boat, because otherwise it will not happen. This required a complete redesign and recalculation of the project, but it got built. And it became a very active place for the community. It has become actually even more popular in the community than for the tourists. The tourists have learned about it from word to mouth, but it's more for, in a way, for the locals. We didn't want to do a hotel that would feel very enclosed. And these are the last two projects that I wanted to talk. Both of them are civic and are government. So one of them was a failure in a way. It never got built. The last one was a success. This first one is the Supreme Court. We were asked to be part of a competition in, I think 2017 or so. Well, Craig worked on it, so he can talk about it. 2016. I couldn't even remember. And we were asked to rethink what a Supreme Court should be for the future of the Philippines. It was a completely different climate then, politically, and they wanted to bring that movement of the people power movement that had ended Marcos' dictatorship. They wanted to bring it back and create a building that would represent the solid democracy that the Philippines was at that point. And in order to do that, we looked at the vernacular architecture, at the identity of the Philippines. We were inspired by the delicate trellises, the nipa huts of those houses. They are called nipa huts. The bamboo structure, but we were also inspired by the modernist architecture of Leandro Locsin, one of the followers of Le Corbusier in the 50s, 60s in the Philippines. And we decided to combine these two elements to build a project for the future. We were extremely, extremely constrained from a functional point of view. This is a building with high security and also very specific guidelines for the function, for the program. So in the end, we found ourselves with a series of stack boxes. But we didn't want these stack boxes to be just that. We wanted to make a building that would acknowledge the climate challenges that we can find now in the Philippines, then and now. We studied together with Arup Engineering the solar radiation, the winds, the water, and we realized that the best solution was creating a building with a double skin. That double skin will help us reduce the use of air conditioning because only those bubbles inside would be conditioned. Everything else would be open to the public and to the elements in a way. And also, it would, I don't know how to say it. It would make it would enhance natural ventilation, and it would create a better connection with the surroundings. Many of these buildings, of these civic government buildings, end up being so enclosed and not connected to the population that we wanted to avoid that. We studied the different landscapes in the Philippines, and we created almost a group of micro gardens or micro landscapes that would represent, as much as we could, the 7,000 islands of the Philippines. And that would also help us with the conditioning of the spaces. If you surround your building with vegetation, you will not need the air conditioning to be as low, because your body has lower temperature by the time that you get into the space. So we study water reuse mechanisms, and we got a building that was a kind of hybrid between the very intense geometries of the brutalism modernist buildings of the 50s, but also the delicacy of the more organic architecture that is vernacular. It required a very tight organization of the functions. I'm not going to go into detail into this because this was very, very limited. We have to follow specifically the square footage. We have to provide renderings and views of every one of them. Also, they have to be almost in very specific locations in the building for security reasons. Even these, and I wanted to bring this rendering because, as an anecdote, we have to put the faces of the judges in the rendering. That was required, and those are the faces of the judges. Even though this building is not going to be as accessible for the general public as our churches or the hotel, we still wanted to bring the people as much as we could to the building. So we lowered the main auditorium all the way to the ground, close to the landscape, and it would be right there in the lobby. You may not be able to access that auditorium, but at least it's more connected to the community. It tries to go back to that idea of the people power demonstration that ended a dictatorship. This project was a failure because it didn't get built. The political climate changed, Duterte got to power, and nothing happened. Not just us, none of the projects in the competition were chosen, and the Supreme Court didn't get a new building. They are still in the old building that they have had, a colonial building, for a very long time, which is a pity because it shows that the Philippines had this very intense push forward that ended with the current situation. But that building influenced the very last one that I'm going to talk about, our volcano, the Kamsur Capitol building. Some other governor in the Philippines saw that project, and he really fell in love in a way with it, and he asked us if we could do a government building for him in an area that is called Camarines Sur. It's also part of the Luzon island, but very far south in relationship to Manila. And it's a beautiful land with a lot of volcanoes. We are very close to one of them, Mount Isarog. We are right there, but there are many others in the island. They have in the zone. They have a lot of colorful celebrations, and they have an economy that is very based on a very specific type of crop. It's called the pilinat. It's a kind of pecan, but slightly more like this shape, almost like a boat. And we took it as our reference because, again, we were given a site that was empty, that was surrounded by rice fields. There was nothing there, and again, we didn't get site plans. It seems to be a constant in our office where we don't get topography maps or anything. We don't get them until the very end. And we took that and we thought, well, why not take in this shell and generate a building that uses it and stacks it in the same way that they do when they collect it, to create the administration and government and government levels. But not only that, we realized that that also had that type of geometry could draw inspiration from the vernacular architecture of the island and again from the modernist architecture of the past. And we got to this crazy building, this kind of muscular, almost brutalist podium with a very delicate 2.0 NIPA hat. So besides the administration offices and government offices, we told the client that we couldn't do a government building that was not a crisis center. We were so close to the volcano that this building needed to have the functions of triage, flooding shelter, earthquake shelter, and typhoon shelter, because all those are possible risks in the area. So all of that happened in the podium, in the basement of the project. We have a lot of showers, changing rooms, additional generators, everything to have thousands of people when one of these crises happen. On top of that, we have a public podium for big celebrations, concerts, campaign, and then the offices, in a way, a more traditional organization. But that's how it would look like in case, more or less, in case that there's an emergency, hopefully in a very long time. We had to study circulation very closely because, again, this was a project with a lot of security constraints and also because of the crisis emergency center. But we always wanted to have that interior atrium open to everyone. We were fortunate again to work with Arup for the engineering. Arup helped us design a very complex system of orbital beams and columns together with those A-shaped frames that we in the office call taco shells because they work like tacos and they act like the thresholds to enter the building. These are some diagrams that we generated with Arup. They help us identify which areas were going to be more influenced by the sun radiation, so we could manage again that double skin that we have designed in that Supreme Court. We brought it back, but now with a different shape that would allow us to have terraces and public spaces on every level. And all this in the end was derived of this diagram. This diagram was one of the first things that we did, where we were trying to identify the climate challenges, but also the possible climate solutions. And that helped us use as little air conditioning as possible. Only the areas that have color have air conditioning. Everything else that is in white doesn't. Again, we generated this with Arup. That's how the building will look like. But the reality is that it's closer to this. I mean, it's surrounded by rice fields and peeling nut trees. So I want to show a video because actually this crazy project got built. It's getting built. Oh, I cannot see my. Oh, I cannot see my. I don't know what it is.
No, it's in the other screen, that's why it's on. Here we go.
Oh my god. Okay, so now, I'm sorry for the bad quality of the video, but should I click it?
I think we're good. There you go.
That is the one that the contractors have given us, and this is what it looked like in October. It's moving forward. You will see that it's growing almost like a mountain because that's part of the flooding resiliency program. But this is happening. It was very exciting to us to see how they are doing it. We are now with all the concrete structure of the podium up. This is the crisis area, the basement level, where all thousands and thousands of people will go if there's another explosion of the volcano, hopefully late, because in the past they have just slept in the rice fields. So yeah, that's it. I hope that it helped. Thank you. Thank you.
Are there time for one or two questions or questions for Laura?
Oh my god.
Did I hear correctly? There's an arm and a leg of the sound?
There's just an arm. Just an arm. Yeah, it was a whole transportation situation that it had to be kept for a period of time in one of the finished rooms that they consecrated specifically for it. It was a whole logistics nightmare in a way.
For the first part of the time,
Yeah. It is true, they follow the rhythm inside. It's true that I should have showed one of the last floor plans. We tried to create a rhythm with the benches that would coordinate the corridors, the openings of those walls, with the corridors of the benches. We ended up modulating it that way because the width of the walls was slightly less than we expected. We were able to make them slightly thinner, so that's why. Yeah.